That's why we are here.
Okay. So we are live now. Essence, please put it on live. Thank you.
Yes, we
Okay,
are live.
okay, we are live. Good. First of all, I welcome all of you who joined us on this very interesting session today. Impact of artificial intelligence on audit and accounting profession. We all have been hearing this thing, I think, over the period of time what artificial intelligence is, and the most interesting combination you all guys gonna be hear about it, how that impacting our very important pillar of our businesses, where the audit and accounting profession is. Before I go further, I would like to invite Mr. Habibur Rahman to recite verses from Holy Quran. Habib, आपका mic voice on नहीं है. Habib, can you turn your
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah, Habib Rahman. Once again, I welcome ladies and gentlemen who's joined us on Zoom session, and also I've been told there's quite a bit audience on our Facebook Live. Thank you very much for taking your time out to join us today on a very, very important topic, which is the impact of artificial intelligence on audit and accounting profession. I have an excellent learned panel here today. And I think this is one of the best opportunity to learn from the experiences and how it has been implicated and impactful in our today's practical practices of audit and accounting. And I also thank you very much for the ICAP's management committee here. I have Mr. Rana Usman Khan Sahib with here. He's Vice President of ICAP. He's also Chairman of the Board for Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh will be joining us shortly, unless he's here. I think he's a president of ICAP. So first of all, let me congratulate ICAP for hosting this very important topic today. Most of the time, we all have this illusion that accounting practices is the one who would be the most impacted by technology, but I think they're the best utilization. In my experiences, the technology's been early adopters are basically accounting and financial sector before anybody else comes to the play. So I think learning from the experiences today will be a great experience. And I just want you to participate in that. We'll be having a question answer session later on. To start with, I would like to invite Mr. Rana Usman for his inaugural words for this session. Rana Sahib.
Thank you very much, Nadeem Saab. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh, President ICAP, he'll be joining us later. Distinguished speakers, Mr. Hussain Isa, SN, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and Assalamu alaikum. This is basically our second webinar, if you recall. One we did in the middle of the COVID, but definitely now things are easing up. We were thinking of having a full day conference during this period had things eased up, but unfortunately still things are progressing. So it's difficult to have a good or big gathering in person at the moment. So again, we have decided to have this series of events. What we wanted to cover in that conference, actually now we want to cover all that through this series of webinar. As you all know, that this is again technical era, technical time, and the accounting profession cannot stay away with this. In the beginning, I would definitely express my pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this extremely relevant and highly important session for the profession of audit and accountancy, particularly under this relevant, prevalent, unprecedented circumstances. You are all aware that the accountancy profession is rapidly changing, reshaping its outlook with these technologies, which are increasingly impacting the business environment. And definitely if business environments of our clients are impacted, so we as professional, be in profession or let's say in industry, our services also impacted. In the current scenario, this accountancy profession needs to be ready to adopt to technology in order to stay relevant and deliver valuable services in a digital economy or digital era, which is, of course, the future. Not the future generally, it is now being said that it is there and we have to adopt it, but of course, the future is going to be technology. While technology continues to change the society generally at a rapid pace, we think that accountants' fraternity by no means remains unaffected. That is why the Digital Assurance Board has been set up by the Institute to bring together leading ICT organizations, experts, forward-thinking accountants, senior financial professionals, and digital transformation experts to engage in high-level discussions and, of course, showcase the latest digital solutions which are impacting our activities and impacting different accountants in their areas. I think you all know, composed of experts from the IT sector, like Nadeem Saab is also part of it. So he's representing Oracle. We have people from SAP. We have accountants from business, accountants from practice. So a good combination of professionals, definitely trying to bring out something which is impacting our accounting fraternity as a whole. The board has definitely in this slide or in this background kicked off series of activities, including today's webinar, pathway toward incubating sustainable digital ecosystem. We are very fortunate to have experts, speakers, presenters on the topic, both from international and local environment. Actually, this has been our scheme of arrangement in the first webinar as well. We brought people from international market. Then we also tried to cover something from the region. Our region, which I mean is the SAFA region, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and then of course our local environment. So today we are also trying, on the advice of Nadeem Alexa, we are keeping it short because we also thought to have this very long conference even on a virtual conference, but we were advised by the experts like Nadeem Saab that don't do it. So we are keeping it for a shorter time, but we have tried to bring here Dr. Isa, which is the international expert in artificial intelligence. He'll definitely enlighten us on what's happening internationally. And then, of course, we have Mr. Ashton, who will be covering what is going on locally in our market or here in Pakistan. Definitely, the concept is that this AI technology and the accounting industry, we are still new into it, but a lot of things have been done and lot is to be done. So not getting into technical details, definitely we have speakers and panelists for that. I would again welcome you all, and very special thanks to Dr. Hussain Ehsan to spare time joining us here. And I'm sure that with their presence and their insight, it will be a very learning and a highly insightful session for all of us. I mean, I would also be learning along with all of you. Being chairman of this board doesn't mean that I'm the IT or technology expert. We are just trying to, or steering this forum to bring all these experts together so that we are here to bring some solutions to our fraternity, which definitely is the need of the time. So I'll not take much of your time. Without taking much time, I'm now handing over the command back to Nadeem Sahab. He'll definitely coordinate and he'll conduct the whole webinar. And I wish and I expect that it's going to be a great learning opportunity for all of us. So once again, thank you very much and warm welcome to this session. And back to Nadeem Sahab, please.
Thank you, Rana Sahab. I think you summarize it very well. Sometimes we believe that technology is itself a magical solution, but each profession adopts it, tailor it, use it to the core of it. So the learning what accounting profession have learned over the years, over the period, and experts who've been involved in this thing, they start using technology as a tool. The technology has been a tool for many, many centuries. But coming to the artificial intelligence, I think we are absolutely a brand new era where technology is no more a tool. Technology is assistance to you. And that's one of the few things I would like to take before I invite our very learned professionals to, enlighten me as well. I think there's a lot of learning for me how the technology is. I'm born and raised in technology. I eat, sleep technology every day. So I've been told to tell some story here. So you bear with me. I'm going to take you to a little journey of 5 minutes, explain what exactly is artificial intelligence is and why it is artificial and why it's not intelligence alone. So I think that probably be, and I'm very open to the question at the end of the session. I hope you'll enjoy the story. So what we have seen it in last many centuries, what we call agrarian society. And then when in agrarian culture, where the agrarian era was there was 80 people out of 100 people used to work in a field to grow enough food to feed 100 people. Today, only 2 people work in a field to grow enough food to feed 100 people. And where the other 80 works, that's how the industrial revolution started. We call it Industrial Revolution 1.0, when we invented steam engines. And this is called Work 1.0, where a human being has all the tools available to enhance his dexterity. He can run faster, he can carry more, he can do more work with that steam engine. Then come electricity. So I think that's Industrial Era 2.0 started and Work 2.0 started. We start working in the factories, our production increases, we have more products coming on the road, transportation, and you name it. Then comes the electricity and the internet and technology comes in. So that's the era of the internet when we start doing the machineries and people are working on different machines and technology adopted as well. All these 3 industrial revolution eras were basically are enhancing what human being can do as a human being and how they use the tools. But today we are in Industrial 4.0, where the work has been also 4.0. And that's where the differential is. That's where the physical and cyberspace is mixing along. That's where we are producing many things. If you look at the history of this thing, the first 3 eras of any industrial revolution was basically empowering the organization, the corporate sector. But today is empowering the people. You have a phone in your hand, you have a TikTok, you have a WhatsApp, you have a Facebook, you have a WeChat, and you are expressing yourself and you basically are individual contributing towards it. So what is that individual contribution towards it? It's called exponential of data. So we have so much data coming along. Most of you probably are wearing a watch, you're carrying the mobile phone. So you are creating so many data points, your location, your weather, your chat, your email, your phone calls, you name it. And each individual is generating the enormous amount of data, and that data is basically now we are struggling to manage it. That data is fueling this Work 4.0. And look at today, us. We are not physically present with each other. We are in a hyper-connected world. Everybody's connected to this forum and this webinar wherever they are. Somebody probably is joining from their phone, sitting in their car, somebody's sitting at home, somebody's in an office, somebody's out in the park, taking a little break from their walk and joining our webinar today. So that is where the technology comes in. That's the new era. That's where the data has been generated, and that's fueling us. So just put that, how much data is there? The IDC says that by 2025, we'll be generating 180 zettabyte every year. That's 180 after 21 zeros. I cannot comprehend. I'm sure you being an accounting profession can see how big number is. So what happened to this? So we have so much data coming in, so much data points been generating, so much data harvesting is happening. So how the organizations are feeling it, who are basically holding this data? Only 12% people feel the impact of the data have they in organization. The data can do something for them. Only 10%, that's a very recent survey. But what exactly happening is we are producing the data, but we're using the data. So there's a big gap between it. We have so much data, but we are using very less data. But where the data lies and how we are using and what's the future of the data and where is heading towards it. So let me just give you a very simple example. I'm sure everybody's driving a car, right? So have this little meter on your car. What does this tell you? This gives you some kind of data. So that data is, for example, what is my speed is, how fast I'm going it. And do I need to go left? Do I need to turn? That's my right indicator, left indicator. How many miles I've driven on this car? That's one of the data. This is called descriptive data. I mean, it describes you something about it. You have a data, but it describes you something about it. Then, as some other cars, which is a little more modern, they also tell you how many miles are left within the gas available in your tank. So that's another thing. What does that give you? That gives you predictive data. The data is predicting something for you. You only have 15 miles worth of data available to you. So you better get to the gas station. So it's predicting after 15 miles, you won't have any gasoline in your car. Then come to the perspective data. So what exactly is? This is where the artificial intelligence is coming into the play. That's what it is. What is the fastest route to my destination? I'm going from my home and I'm going to my office or somebody else's house and somebody else's place I want to go. And I want to know how fast route to my destination. I'm sure most of us will use Google Maps that give you, you take this route. And if you take this route, the traffic is there. There's not much traffic. The road is under construction or not under construction. This much your time can save from this to that thing. That gives you perspective data. So that's a new era of the work. The perspective data in accounting and in audit, which I'm sure you'll be learning more. It can give you, it can predict, it can give you perspective of risk analysis, and it gives you where the audit identify different discrepancies or other things. So that is where the artificial intelligence comes into play. So how that works? So you have a data, which is your customer data, traditional data, some modeling. Then there's a data outside your organization, for example, temperature, for example, other organization, economic indicator, World Bank report, and all sort of the data available to you. And then there's a data coming up from different sources and data is no more numbers and figures. I think accounting practices probably only confined to what we call numbers and figures, but the data is audio, data is images, data is video, and all kind of things were considered with the data today. And if you combine all this data and what we call artificial intelligence does the same thing what a human do. We have a census. So there are sensors available who can sense temperature, who can sense your altitude, you can sense your speed, you can sense many things. So they're called IoT. Then this data is verified by the blockchain. And then what's happened? Then the computer system, which is a modern artificial intelligence computer system, they understand this data, just like humans understand this data. And then they basically react, they reason. One of the definition of artificial intelligence or any intelligence is ability to reason. Then they learn, then they interact. These four qualities make artificial intelligence. And that is the next era of autonomous. The autonomous cars, we all know about Tesla and everything, probably we are fascinated about it. System will understand the data. System will learn out of the model we make, System will reason it, learn more, and learn how to interact with me. And in today's presentation, you'll see how the system is interacting with us. Dr. Isa has wonderful things to present to you on that point. And Asen is also going to give you how this understanding and how the data gathering is there, how we reach what's available to us, and how we reach to artificial intelligence. And that's also taking not only autonomous, also augmented reality. Tomorrow, your refrigerator will tell you're out of eggs or milk, or your milk expire, get some more. You know, that's autonomous and augmented reality as well. So I just want to set up some tone what artificial intelligence is fueling by the data we are generating around us and organizations are generating around us, how we use it to get the things we need to do more precisely and better for our customers and ourselves. Thank you very much. I just want to set a little stage. I hope that little story would clarify what artificial intelligence is. The last question, why this is artificial? Because it has not reached the level of human being yet, and it's still an artificial. And my faith says because human being made it, so it's gonna remain artificial. It's not an almighty's creation. So that's what it is. So that, having said that, so let me just introduce, I think you already have an introduction. We have an excellent speakers here today. We have Dr. Isa from Rutgers University, and he's joining from US. He'll give you a global perspective. So please welcome Dr. Isa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. I'm really honored to be here among those very smart people that will make me look and sound a little bit not so smart. And I know that Nadeem and Rana said that my presentation will be interesting. I'm not sure about that. I think that interesting things we will hear later on, all of us from Hassan. So my name is Hussein Isa. I'm from Rutgers University in New Jersey. And my research area and basically I'm more familiar. My training is in AIS, so I'm one of those nerds who enjoy not only accounting but also data analytics, which is weird, I know. So I'm going to share my screen, and what I will be talking about is emerging technologies, basically in auditing. Screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank
yes,
you.
It's visible. It's visible. I think you can run your slideshow. Yeah, that's good.
Yes,
that's good.
Thank you so much. So basically what we will talk about today is, and again, I'm a faculty. So as an academic, we look a lot about how the changing landscape affects not just the profession, but our education as well. And I come from Rutgers, where we have a lot of research related to continuous auditing, continuous assurance, and we'll also discuss some of the emerging technologies that are being used. This is something like Nadeem mentioned. It's not something that's futuristic. This is something that's happening now, whether, and we understand that some people are still doing certain things in the old ways, but things are changing and they are changing rapidly. So the first thing that I want to explain here is that we have changing, even like for AACSB, which gives accreditation for business schools. They have new standards that require business schools to modify their and to adjust their or adapt to the changing landscape by integrating information technology and emerging technologies into their curriculum. Unfortunately, and I admit, most accounting curriculum, if you look at it, they are still taught in the same way that they have been taught years and years ago, decades ago, actually. So nothing has changed much from the way it was taught. However, in the profession, you can see that actually academia is lagging behind the profession. Hassan will tell you later on about the initiatives that they have. The Big Four and the big companies, they are actually making a lot of investments. They are making a lot of effort into adopting these technologies, whether it was blockchain, RPA, text mining, whether it was AI, etc. So these, the goal nowadays of the business schools should be to bridge the gap between the two. Our school has one of the advantages in that a part of our research is actually is applied, and we do work a lot with accounting firms, we work with banks, we work with companies, etc., to try and introduce this kind of technology from an accounting and auditing perspective. Now, when we talk about continuous auditing, the main idea behind, and this is an old concept, it's been around for like 30 years. What's different is now the technology is here. So like Nadim mentioned, we've had the technology for a while, but what is new is that now we have affordable technology and it is accessible to many people. In the 80s, for instance, there was a big hype about artificial intelligence, but most companies could not afford to have a computer there. So let alone to have a mainframe, a server, or something that can run those very powerful algorithms. Right now, this is a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to have storage. It's a lot cheaper to have the computational power, etc. So that made it accessible to more people. Our phones are actually very powerful computers. This is just a phone. It can do all the things that Nadim was telling you about. It can tell you what the temperature is outside. It can tell you, predict the best or prescribe the best routes. So it can do some data, some prescriptive analysis, as well as descriptive or predictive. So it can do all these things, and it's a very small device. So imagine what we can do with more powerful tools. So continuous auditing, the concept behind it was that instead of waiting for a periodic audit, why not analyze it in a close to the event manner? So the idea is not to do it every second. The idea is basically, rather than taking a sample, you run the analysis on 100% of the population, and you don't need to wait until the end of the year or until like every 6 months or every 3 months to run your analysis. We are generating a huge amount of data, digital data, and it's important to understand that this is the fact that it is digital allows us to run all this analysis. The thing is, with the data, we're not using it as much, and Nadim showed that it's like 12% or something, of people understand the importance of data, and that we are using a very minimal amount of data that is being produced. Here, rather than taking a sample, when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of records or transactions, we argue that you shouldn't be taking a sample of 50 or 100. It's not really representative of the population. Why not run analysis on the entire population, identify those exceptions or outliers, and then focus your effort and your investigation on those cases? And the idea is that those they are at much higher risk, they present a much higher risk than a normal transaction. So this is the idea behind continuous auditing. The other thing is that, and this is based on our research projects. So whenever we have I had like once a research project with a telecommunication company. I was trying to identify duplicate invoices. There were a lot of candidates, like 900 candidates. So when I gave them to the internal audit department of that company, they were like, no, we cannot handle that. This is too much. Give us better numbers. So usually even those exceptions, because of the large size of the data, you also expect to have a lot of exceptions. And I understand that accounting firms and the ICPA, they don't like to use the word exception. So let's call it notable items. Those are things of interest or items of interest that we want to look at. Traditionally, they would require human involvement as well as technology involvement. What that means is the people might be overwhelmed with the amount of information. When you have large number of exceptions, you might be finding it more difficult to identify a certain pattern. And like, how many of us had something like this, where you feel that you have all this work that you need to do and you don't know where to start. imagine each paper of these is an exception that you need to investigate, to further investigate. You will say that, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. I'm only one person. So this is why the concept of exceptional exceptions, that was actually my dissertation topic. And it was about how can you process, because traditionally you identify the exceptions and you give them to the auditor or to the human user, and they have to deal with it. So I was thinking about it from a different perspective. How can we help the user look at the more interesting parts of those exceptions? Because even those exceptions become on their own, become too many. So the idea was that let's do it in a way, in a risk-based manner. After all, the audit, the auditing profession is about risk and evaluating risks. So in this case, so let's do that. Let's present those exceptions in the order of risk that they present. This is how we would give it. And this framework, I have to kind of, from an academic perspective, I have to present those kind of panels, those kinds of frameworks, because it makes me look smart and it makes my paper more academic-like. Basically, it boils down to this. You have a whole bunch of transactions. You run different analysis. You identify those exceptions. And at the end, you end up with those exceptions that are really interesting, what we call exceptional exceptions, which was, by the way, the title of my dissertation. And the funny thing is, when I chose the title Exceptional Exceptions, one of the senior faculty at Rutgers told me that this is not really interesting. This is not really good for, this is not really a good title. And when I asked him, why is it not a good title? The answer was, it's too cute for academics. And the thing is, usually with academic papers, if you have ever read like an academic paper, you would see that the title is like a whole paragraph, like an ordered logistic regression model to evaluate and assess the internal control, quality, etc. So by the time you're done with the title, the time for your presentation is over. That's why when I selected exceptional exceptions, they didn't like it. But my advisor did, and just like what that one person did. Anyways, so this is basically, it boils down to this. You have the full population. You run your analysis, you identify those exceptions. From that, you use different methodologies. So like you can use an expert panel, you can use belief functions, you can use different types of additional filters that would identify within those exceptions. It can identify the ones that present the highest risk. And this becomes the prioritized list of exceptions. Think about it in the same way that your emails, you know, like how you have the focus email in certain, not necessarily in Outlook, but like in like live, I think, like Outlook.com, like which used to be Hotmail and Gmail, etc. You have the focused one. So you have what they consider it might be an important one, and then you have all the not necessarily junk, but all the other emails that might come like advertisement, etc. They don't want to consider them maybe junk, but at the same time, they are not as important as an email coming from your boss, for instance. So this is basically doing the same concept here by prioritizing those emails. Now we're taking that and we apply it to accounting and auditing. And this is, I admit, this is not just, these concepts are not theoretical. These have been done. I admit that there have been done more at internal audit, and we need to understand in a way why. Internal auditors are not bound by any standards, whereas external auditors, they have to deal with their clients, but they also have to follow the standards. They have to be able to defend their work in case of a PCAOB inspection, for instance. If they are inspected, they need to be able to interpret the results. Some of the AI algorithms are what we call black box, like neural networks, for instance. You know that this is a result and they are very powerful, but in certain cases, you cannot really interpret why the results were reached in that manner. And as auditors, most of the time you need to be able to say, okay, I highlighted that transaction because it violated a certain rule and not because the algorithm told you to do that. This is not gonna work with a PCAOB inspection. However, accounting firms are doing that sometimes, and probably Hassan can tell a lot more about this, but from what we heard and from our interaction with them, and we had actually a project that's a research initiative that's called the Rutgers AICPA Data Analytics Research Initiative. We call it the RADAR. It was with the AICPA in the US. It was also with like the Big 4+4 companies and accounting firms. And then we were also doing this. We had a project similar to this, where we tried to come up with methodologies to justify why the auditor can actually use those exceptional exceptions as opposed to just take a random sample. This is basically, again, it's not a new concept. It's simply that those are technologies. This is it's a way of thinking. It's a mindset in a way that you want to take advantage of the full population. It goes back to Nadim's point of using just a small part of the data. Try to use more data, and you will have a more solid result that you would be comfortable at the end issuing an opinion or saying that this is okay or not okay, this is legitimate or fraudulent. You can say it, but with more confidence. After all, this is what you're trying to do. No one is trying to present something with like, it's not like, after all, it's a reasonable assurance. You're not going to give absolute assurance. This is not possible. So what has been changing in the landscape of technology and the auditing profession is that we have a lot more artificial intelligence integrated in the accounting and auditing professions. We have, like, we will talk a little bit about drones, etc. Blockchain, I'm just going, like, I put it here just to say, so what types of things that are already mentioned here. RPA, we'll talk about it later on. If time permits, I'm gonna explain a little bit about like process mining as well. All these things are different technologies, but the main focus here is about artificial intelligence. And many of these, they play together. So they are not like exclusive technologies. That's the nice thing about it. You can have artificial intelligence and drones, and you can have, for example, RPA and artificial intelligence. So to just say what artificial intelligence is, this is to reiterate what Nadim said. This is not trying to replace it. It's not a robot. It's not the Matrix. This is more of a program. It's not a robot. It's a program that humans have programmed. But what it does is it tries to imitate or to mimic what humans do. Think about it from this perspective. If you have a human assistant and you want to know what is next on your calendar, you ask your assistant, what do I have next on my calendar? When is my next meeting? Your assistant would go to a database, that's your calendar, identify the next meeting that you have, and then they would come back to you with an answer, right? That's the simplest way of, this is a very simple example. Now, we all have used artificial intelligence, even if we don't notice, like if you're using Siri or Google Assistant, or if you're using Cortana or Alexa. So it doesn't matter. If you're using one of these digital assistants, it tries to mimic the same behavior of your human assistant. You ask Siri, what do I have next on my calendar? Siri would translate audio to text, would run text analysis, identify keywords, then Siri would go to a database, that's your calendar, identify what's next on your, when is your next meeting, comes back to you, converts the results to audio, and then would give you the answer. This is a very simplistic way of looking at AI, but this is why a lot of people who have concerns about like AI is going to take my job. No, it's not. It's going to change and modify your job, because these are some of the things. They cannot do everything. There's a difference between there's something else that's called general artificial intelligence. This is the intelligence that we see in the movies, where you have a robot that is as smart or even smarter than humans. We are not there yet. I doubt that we will be there anytime soon. And this is a very simple example of, that's how I actually explained it to even to my kids. Because like when my kids asked me once about my research and I tried to explain it to them, they found it too boring, which they are right. I mean, come on, it's talking about accounting and auditing and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but in general, for a kid, when you tell them about this, I'm not telling them about rocket science, I'm telling them about debits and credits or about research that is related to AI, etc. So it was kind of difficult. So I tried to simplify it like this. So this is a simple classification problem. You think about AI as a child. You're trying to teach the child the difference between a square and a circle. So you give them a bunch of squares and tell them, this is a square, this is a square, this is a square. And then you also give them a bunch of circles. This is a circle, this is how a circle looks like, this is a circle. And then to test them if they actually understood what you're saying, you give them a new data, a new shape. Tell them, is this a circle or a square? If they identify it correctly, that means they learned it. They give them another one. You test them with another data. You also give them this one. I ask them to classify it. If they classify it correctly, that's good. You give them this, a new data as well. And then if they misclassify it, that means they misunderstood the concept. Now, this error on its own becomes also like another teaching point, because in this case, you tell them that, no, this was classified as a circle, but it's not, it's a square. You should go to the other side. This is the AI algorithm, and this is the training data, and the new ones are the testing data. This is how you train a model. Now, that was a very simplistic one. This is actually, you look at it from a more, this is the formal way. You have the AI or machine learning algorithm. You have the algorithm you need to use, you need to use the training data. So you use the training data, you train the model. Once the model is trained, like this becomes a training model, you bring in the new data. This is the input data, this is the new data. Think about it like the previous year's transactions. You were able to identify two types of transactions. One of them is legitimate, the other one is fraudulent. So now the model understands, the algorithm understands the difference between a fraudulent transaction and a legitimate transaction. You bring in this year's new data and you run it by the learned algorithm, okay? So the algorithm would then predict whether this transaction will turn out to be a fraudulent transaction or a legitimate transaction. You need to evaluate that later on, and this evaluation and this data from this year becomes an additional learning data for next year, because if you find that it flagged a certain transaction as fraudulent, you investigate it, you find that it was legitimate, this is another learning point for the algorithm. This is this is basically a simplistic way of looking at machine learning, but this is how it would work. Again, we talked about this. We talked about like how faster technology and cheaper storage and the investments that are done by companies are driving AI integration in various, not just in accounting and auditing, in marketing, in management, etc. But it's also, from our point and our perspective, it is also done by many companies. And this is why you see like there's a race, because no one wants to be left behind. You will lose your competitive advantage if you don't follow what other companies are doing and you do not invest. And these are just examples of what machine learning can do. I don't know about like you, but like how, if you have used, for example, Google Translate. Google Translate does not only translate words. It can actually, it does not only translate text. You can actually use it with a camera. You just put it in front of a foreign text. Say if you want to translate something from French or Portuguese, you just put it in front of it, and it would give you, it will translate it instantaneously on the screen. And this is, again, using AI to provide another service. Visualization. I mean, there are different ways of using visualization. There is explanatory data analysis as well as exploratory data analysis. The first one is when you don't really know a lot about the data. Exploratory, you're just exploring what the data is. You're trying to like, you don't know much about your client. You want to understand, you're exploring the data to see, for example, the risk associated with that client, right? Explanatory is when you want to confirm whether something happened or not. And we have seen these with COVID-19. We have seen like a lot of people have seen all these graphs, etc. And I'm not going to go into details about this, but basically the main advantage of visualization is the dashboards in a way similar to the car dashboard, because it gives you different points of information that you need to aggregate, and you need to come up with kind of your decision what to do next. So visualization is very powerful. It is a way of representing the results, but also the data itself. It can, as humans, we can better identify patterns when they are used in a visual form. And many companies nowadays are using Tableau, and many companies that are using now Tableau. They use ClickView, they use Power BI, and a lot of these tools, by the way, like Power BI, is free to use. So you just can download it and play around with it. And I strongly recommend anyone who's interested in these areas. And like, for example, with if you're interested in, and we'll talk about robotic process automation later on, but you can use it for your own use. You can just test it and play around with it. You don't have to invest a lot in it at the beginning. You can just test it. There are tools like there are like several software that are very powerful, AI software, like machine learning software, like Weka. They have like a visualization you can use, like Power BI. Many of them are free to try or free to use. You can just test them and look at them. Now, when it comes to drones, I hope that I'm not going too fast, but so drones, when we talk about drones can be used for multiple things. Like drones can be used for inspection. You can and we are actually in the process of writing a paper about how to use drones for revenue purposes, like when you're dealing with bridges, for example, or with buildings where it's really difficult for someone to physically access or get there to see the level of completion of a certain project. So it can be used for inspection. It can be used for like damage assessment. Like if you had a fire, you don't want to send someone inside a building like this to evaluate the damages, right? So if, for example, a company is, or like after a hurricane, if someone is kind of wants to write off a certain thing, a certain property, or if someone is asking for a lot of money, like a unit is asking for a lot of money to run some maintenance or to fix a building, and the auditor wants, for example, to look at it, or management or someone else, they want to look inside a building like this. No one wants to be inside a building like this. No company wants to send their auditors or their employees into a building like that. I mean, I admit, my wife might be willing to send me there, just kind of say that, go see what's happened inside in that building. But it doesn't mean that the company would do that. I doubt the Rutgers would allow me to go inside a building like this. I'm just kidding. My wife doesn't want to send me to a building like that. It was just a joke. I usually try to make jokes because I like to think of myself as funny, and in accounting that's difficult to make, to be entertaining. But the thing is, you can use drones to do this kind of things. Of course, it can be used for surveillance, etc. And one thing that, and I'm talking about AI in general here, like drones can be combined with AI, and we'll give specific examples. But like bridges, for example, government auditors, sometimes they have to investigate bridges and kind of to look at bridges and look at their status, etc. There's a lot of money that is spent in the maintenance of bridges. How can you verify the completion of a specific project? Now, that's not easy. And I would never want to be dangling from a bridge like that. No matter how much money you give me, I'm not doing that job. But again, this is very difficult, very dangerous, and costly. But we can actually use a drone, pass it under the bridge. It gives you a lot more data because you can actually attach with cameras and videos. You have already documentation. You already have safety and cost reduction. And by the way, engineers, they use it all the time. So why is engineering using drones for bridges, for example, and not auditors and accountants? Why don't they use it? The technology is there. We just need to take that step and do that. Like, for example, EY, they have, so Ernst & Young, they have actually this drones. It's a case study, and we use it in our courses sometimes. It actually takes aerial images using a drone. It combines that with an artificial intelligence software that would count sheep rather than someone in person counting sheep to know how many they have. They actually use a software that would identify sheep and which ones are yes and no, and you can fix them, etc. But what it does, this is actually, it allows you to count it a lot faster and a lot more accurate than a human user does. This is another example. This is being done now. It's not there. I mean, EY has been experimenting with that for a while, using drones in inventory counts. And you can do the same thing for like warehouses, etc. You can automate some of that. So this comes now to robotic process automation. The robotic process automation is also, it's not a full-fledged automation. What's nice about robotic process automation is it's software that lays on top of your existing infrastructure. So one of the things that it can do, as long as you're using a computer and a keyboard and a mouse, that RPA can actually mimic everything that you're doing. It can click in the same way that you do. It can actually type in the same way that you can. What it does, it can actually, it can interact with multiple software. Like, for example, sometimes if you're using a legacy system that does not have any automation capabilities, it can copy information from there and paste it in an Excel sheet or in a different application. So all these are things that RPA can do. It's not replacing the human, it's assisting them. And some of the processes that would work well with that is when you have a repetitive process because you want to save time. Like, for example, you have sometimes processes that would be like, I'm not going to say mindless, but they don't require a lot of judgment. They just like, it's just point and click and you're done with that. These are the ones that are mostly helpful for RPA. And it can read emails, it can open emails, send emails, it can actually make calculations, open multiple applications, copy, paste, fill forms, etc. This is a case study that we actually had with an accounting firm in New York City. They wanted to run some analysis in their tax software, and the tax software does not allow for automation. In fact, they have a CAPTCHA to prevent automation. So we were able to create a bot for them that would, this is an actual thing that they are using in their audits now. So this is, again, it goes back to the fact that this is not theoretical. This is now happening. So what it does, it actually enters the user's credentials. It asks them for a CAPTCHA image. They would enter it, and then it would navigate to the folder that is necessary. It would run the analysis that they want, import the file, a new Excel file, and then run the additional analysis, export the file into Excel, rename the file, and then run additional analysis in Excel, like macros, etc. Finalize create pivot tables, etc., and then finalize the file and give it to the auditor ready for analysis, for interpretation. They don't need to rerun the same thing every time. They just hit the button and then it would run the analysis for them. What they need to do is they need to put certain parameters like their credentials, their credentials, what else? So their credentials and their information. I'm going to show you now very quickly a small bot. It's a very simplistic bot. This bot, what it does, it has invoice data. This is like just transaction. Every transaction, every invoice is one row. And then it has a template, which is called master invoice. This is a template, all right? So let's use this one. What it will do, and I'm gonna run the file. It will start creating, instead of me having to go inside the file and kind of copy the information from each file of them, I'm gonna wait. So this is the template. It started to get the information from that invoice data. It's copying. I'm not touching. I swear, I'm not touching anything. I have my hands up. It actually enters all the information from that file. It reads from specific columns. You specify the columns, and it does that in the background. You don't need to do anything. It starts creating. So now you have master invoice 3331, and then you have 3332. It creates it until all the rows finish. And so this is basically what you would be doing with RPA.
So,
this is an example.
Dr. Isa, I don't want to interrupt here, but we're just like short of time.
I'm wrapping up.
Thank you very much.
So I'm gonna stop the bot now, because I mean this was a demonstration of what a bot can do. And basically, the next thing this is something that we talked about. A lot of people have concerns about job security, about automation, and etc. And I believe, like Nadeem also, I believe, like you said that earlier, I don't think that this is here to replace us. It's more to assist us. You can think about technology as either a replacement or an assistance. Sorry if I took longer than I was supposed to. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, and I'll be happy to later on answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. I think, Dr. Isa, I'm sure we could go on with such interesting. I think I also lost the track of the time because the conversation was so interesting and going into the right direction. I really appreciate that. I think you rightly said that whenever the new technology or new era comes into the play, the very first thing is my job will be replaced. But we have seen over the period of time, and we have seen in the history, people have this ability to learn the new skill. The new mantra today is learn to unlearn and relearn now, because that's what the most important part in today's era. Rather than learning the new skill set, you have to unlearn now, because it's altogether a brand new thing. I think that's what the job security is not an issue. It was only issue when if you do not learn or unlearn what you have learned historically. The new era is we all see around it. Thank you very much for your time. And before I take more time, I'll invite Mr. Ahsan Shehzad for the local perspective. But seeing this hyper-connected world, I think local and global perspective are kind of melting into each other. And let's say Ahsan perspective. Please welcome Ahsan Shehzad from our EY Fort Roads, Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Nadeem sir. And wonderful presentation by Dr. Hussain. And he has actually provided a great insight into the emerging technologies. So let me share my screen now so that I can present my. I think I'm having some issues. Just 1 second, please. Okay.
So then that's why, Malik Sahab, this is artificial technology.
Okay, if I can request the IT team to share my presentation, please.
Yeah, who will please take care of it if you can run the presentation.
I have already shared.
Yeah, Imran, if you can look into it. Imran, do we have Ahsan's presentation if we can run? Yeah, now it is on the screen. So who is operating? Ahsan, yourself or somebody from ICAP?
I think I don't have access, but I think someone from ICAP can. Okay, thank you very much.
They can hand over. They can hand over the access to you to start with, or
yes,
just
that would be great.
So
is it
just
possible
check.
you can hand over that thing to Essen, or? Essen, can you try one more time, run from your side?
Yeah, sure, I'll try. Because I'm trying it, it's unfortunately is not able to.
Sir, if you find any difficulty to run the presentation, so I can run the presentation for you, if
Yeah,
you
please
allow
do
me.
that. Yeah, I think
Sure, sir.
Essen, is you going through, or is gonna work from your
Yeah,
side?
I'm trying, but unfortunately,
It's okay. Don't
so
worry
far
about
I have not.
it. Go ahead. You run from and just
Okay.
wait from his
Yeah,
queue.
thank you very much. Okay, so okay, should I start now, please, right?
Yeah. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have divided my presentation in 4 parts. Next slide, please. So I have divided my presentation in 4 parts. The first part actually talk about the importance of this topic, and already Dr. Hussain and Nadeem Saab has covered it well, but I'll briefly still touch upon the importance of this topic for accounting and auditing professionals. In the second part of my presentation, I will talk about on the impact of data analytics and RPA on the audit and finance function, particularly with some practical use cases and the impact on the audit quality due to the use of data analytics and RPAs, and going forward due to the use of AI. Within that second part, I will also discuss how finance function in Pakistan particularly, and generally all over the world, they are actually getting benefits and getting opportunity from the deployment of various technologies. In the third part of my presentation, I'll talk about the challenges which we are facing, and in Pakistan as well as in generally all over the world, the challenges in deployment of these disruptive technologies. And in the fourth part of my presentation, I will talk about the regulator's perspective, which is very important for us to understand how the regulators will be looking at the changes due to the implementation of data analytics and artificial intelligence in the audit. Okay, so no one can deny this fact that in 21st century, the technology has really transformed the way we live, work, and communicate with each other. Actually, it is disrupting virtually every field, every industry that exists today, and overturning the existing business models and creating new ones. So for us as an auditor, as a finance professional, it is really important for us to understand what actually is driving the fourth industrial revolution, which Nadeem Saab has really deeply covered in the opening session. So once again, I would like to highlight here that it is the driving the whole revolution and disruptive technologies. And in addition to that, there is acceleration of pace of change that is driving the force. Can you please click next? Okay, so basically the disruptive technologies, which are staggering new range of disruptive technologies, Dr. Isa has discussed in detail. I'll not go into much detail about that, but I'll just highlight the importance of big data analytics as well as the RPAs in the audit and finance function. That is basically the advanced computing abilities are actually driving the whole ability of professionals to analyze data more in detail. Okay, so can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so this is an important slide which actually highlight opportunities for finance professionals. Obviously, we all know that there are challenges. I'll discuss in the third part of my presentation, but here I would like to discuss the opportunities for finance professionals, particularly the CFOs, the internal and external auditors, as well as the external investment analysts. So the CFOs can actually bring efficiencies in the recording, aggregating the transaction, the whole process of aggregating and recording the transaction. So I'll talk about a couple of examples in the real use cases where recording of transaction was really made efficient by the use of RPAs. For the audit and be it internal auditor or external auditor, I think the use of data analytics has already changed a lot of dynamics in their audit methodologies. And the important thing is that they are bringing in efficiencies and effectiveness. From the investment analyst perspective, I would say that the ratio analysis which they usually perform on the corporate reporting, based on the corporate reporting, the ratio analysis can have more deeper insight, and they can actually, as a human being, they can just interpret. Rest of the work can be done by the technologies. So a couple of technologies which are being used by finance and audit professionals in Pakistan, I would just highlight here. Optical character recognition, that OCR is very much in, and that's really that's used for in account payable and invoicing purposes, and particularly after the implementation of IFRS 16. Contract scanning, because there are a lot of contracts, large scale contracts, so OCR technology is being used, and the exceptions are being dealt by the humans. Similarly, RPAs are helping the transactions to be entered into the system for accounting purposes and consolidation purposes, thereby reducing the work of humans, and then ultimately the judgments and estimates are being done by the humans. So I'll not spend much time here because this has already been discussed earlier. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so this is again the disruptive technologies which I have discussed. Dr. Isa has discussed in detail. I will not spend much time here. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay, again, this is the self-explanatory information about artificial intelligence, and it's already discussed very in detail by Dr. Ihsan. So I'll just go to the second part of my presentation. Okay, so can you please move to the next slide? So that's an area where I think now we will talk about what's happening on ground. In the big four firms, and also in other, I'm sure in other firms as well globally, the audit strategies are evolving. Right now,
Asan, I think we are losing your voice for a bit. Is anybody else experiencing the same thing from Asan's side?
we all know that audit is a burning platform, and failures, unfortunate failures,
Asan,
there are the regulators and the shareholders to improve the quality.
We just lost you for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. I think the voice was breaking up. I think he dropped off. I probably will be joining us right away. Let's let me check on it.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, back. Okay.
Okay. So
happens.
Basically, the audit strategy, starting from scope, execution, and conclusion, all three phases are actually changing. Why? Because we are having ability to analyze 100% data. Okay, so can you please move to the next slide? Okay, now here it's actually give you a fair idea how the strategies are evolving. If you see here in the past, and most of our clients, we are currently deploying this traditional audit approach where we have control testing on sample of transactions, similarly performing ESPs, primary substantive procedures, other substantive procedures. This is what we are doing on our audits. Here, important thing which I would like to highlight is that when we say that the use of data analytics, what does it mean? It means that we have we first obtain a complete set of data dump from the clients, and that data dump has different fields. We obtain around 22 data points through the master file of the client, and then we ensure completeness. This is very important at this stage to actually highlight for the audience that the data completeness, ensuring data completeness is very important. Once, if the data completeness is not ensured, I'm afraid that the results of the data analytics, particularly on PSPs and OSPs, primary substantive procedures, and audits of other substantive procedures, these terminologies are familiar to those who are from the audit profession and attending this session. So right now what we are doing is that in our firm, we have specialized audit programs where when we go for a data analytics based audits, for example, on revenue, receivables, we have to follow that specific audit program. And that actually provides various analysis on various account balances, particularly on general ledgers, journal entries, payables, receivables. I will show you that in the next slide, the tools which we are using and how we are actually analyzing the data based on the data we receive from client. In the coming few years, what we are expecting is that there would be a control-based approach as well. Right now, we also do a control-based audit, but again, that is on the sample of the transaction. But in the data analytics or based audit or data-driven audit, the control-based would the control testing would be for the entire population, identifying particular processes or class of transactions which are relevant for the auditors, which are important for the organization as a whole. Those spots or class of transactions will be tested for the entire population rather than on a sample of population. And going forward, which we say as a smart audit approach, it will be supported by a lot of technological support such as AI, machine learning, advanced analytics, blockchain. These are all technologies, and an important thing which I would like to highlight is that this is not just a theoretical piece of paper which I'm showing. There are a lot of tools which we have, which EY globally has already developed. Some of them are in a prototype phase, and some of them already been deployed on a couple of clients. So as Dr. Lisa mentioned, that the continuous and close to real-time audit, that perhaps looks like the future of the auditing profession. Okay, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so please show this complete presentation slide. Okay, so basically on this slide, I will like to show you our tools which we are using there are a couple of more clicks. You need to please open that complete slide. Okay, so right now we have around 6 analyzers which we are using. So just to give again a brief background, first of all, we get data, complete data from the client in the form of data dump. Now, there is a challenge when there are certain clients, certain companies who do not have a complete set of, or they have complete old legacy banking system, legacy ERPs, old systems, accounting systems, and their databases are not enough to provide us the required fields. Obviously, on those clients, it is really difficult for us to deploy data analytics driven audit. And unfortunately, we have seen here in Pakistan that some of the government clients are also not having proper sophisticated softwares for recording the accounting transactions. So some of the even government organizations, some have manual systems. So obviously on those clients, we are not able to apply data-driven audit. So what actually happens is that when we have a complete data, we ensure completeness. How we ensure the completeness? We take the opening trial balance, and then independently we take total debits and total credits from the data dump which we have taken from the client. That total debits and credits are then actually mapped with the relevant journal ledgers, and closing trial balance is created by our teams. Now that closing trial balance is then compared with the trial balance provided by the client for the year ended, which is subject to audit. So we come up with differences. Those differences are then resolved. Some of them are usually because of the change in new general ledgers are open and some of the reclassifications happen. So once the completeness of the data is ensured, then we prepare a file, cube file, or you can say exe file for explanation purposes, and that file is then put it into the our analyzer to prepare various reports and analysis. General ledger analyzer gives us the complete view of the all journal entries. Trade, purchase, and payable gives us, these tools actually prepare working papers for us. Lots of lead sheets are prepared, lots of analyses are prepared, month-on-month analysis is prepared, gross margin analysis is prepared. For payroll, the analysis of headcount versus the gross pay is also compared. Similarly, for the PP&E analyzer, we get depreciation and accumulated depreciation analysis. So these are the generally used analytics tools in our firm, and which are really giving us a detailed insight of the all the data being processed by the organizations throughout the year. Can you please click on the next? Okay, so briefly, this is the total suite of the analytics tools which we are deploying in EY, and obviously there are still developments going on, and a lot of other tools are being deployed. On the next slide, I'll discuss the benefits which we have obtained, and we believe that these benefits can also be obtained by all other professionals who are already willing to actually start doing audit based on the data or data-driven audit. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay. So this is really important. Basically, when we have a complete data dump or complete data of the organization, we actually come up with very unique insight information, and that really helped the management as well. It's not the case that we get information for our audit purposes that ultimately benefits the organization or the client or the auditee itself. One of the critical example I would like to share here is that one of my client, we prepared one of the report from this data analytics tool. That report was relating to segregation of duties. When we get the data from the client, we actually get user ID wise information. So we have user IDs, and each user ID has posted how many entries in what number of GLs and at what time the entries were posted. So we came to know that one person with X user ID was posting entries in the expense ledger as well as in the bank ledger. So we highlighted this from the report of segregation of duties, and we discussed with the management. And it was actually an erroneously IT gave the right to that person to post the entries in the bank, and then this was actually later on rectified by the management. So this is really important insight. This is one aspect which I'm telling you. Otherwise, we get to have a lot of other information. Let's say, for example, we know there are time lags. For example, sometimes transactions are posted on one day, and there is a lag of 3 days when the transaction is actually approved by the approver, and then it is posted or effectively posted in the system. So the time lag is also visible to us during the audit. Sometimes it happens that the transactions were posted at the year end, let's say 30th of June, and the transaction were actually approved on 15th of July. So this time lag is also visible to us when we review the reports from this tool. In addition to that, we quickly able to have what kind of manual entries were posted. And one other important aspect which we noted, and we highlighted this to the management, and it was again very much appreciated, that we noted that around 70% of the transactions during the whole year were posted by one user. So this was again overburdenness of one person, which can ultimately lead to errors in the financial reporting. And another aspect which we noted from our receivable analysis was that 90% that entity actually had a complete process where everything, all the sales transactions were routed through accounts receivable, and there were no cash sales. But we noted that roughly 92% of the sales were through AR. Still 8% transactions were not routed through AR. So there was actually an issue of pairing of the account balances. So this is actually, I tell you, if I can speak for more than 2 hours and 3 hours on the benefits of the data analytics in our audit, which we have obtained during the last 3 to 4 years. And but the purpose here to give a couple of examples is to highlight the importance for us in Pakistan to start deploying analytics. And I'm sure that other firms are also, big four firms would also be applying, but the other small and medium practices, I'm sure they would consider adopting this analytics-based audit approach in their routine audits. Can you please go to the next slide? And apart from giving us the benefits, this actually improve the efficiencies and quality of the audit. Okay, now coming to the RPAs which we are using in the audit right now, there are around 12 RPAs which Eva Mina has been using over the last 1 to 2 years. So these are not AI enabled RPAs. So first thing is that, because AI enabled RPAs are actually, we call it intelligent automated automation, but these are standard RPAs which actually convert or which actually perform those repetitive tasks which we usually perform. For example, when I have a complete data, I populate it into my GL analyzer, let's say, now I have to generate certain reports. Those reports have certain parameters, which I will give, and then I'll generate the reports. EY, what EY has done actually is that they have actually automized this process of generating various reports. So this is the process which we are using. First of all, obviously we do the data cleansing, data mapping, completeness of testing. This is what at the initial stage it is done. And then RPA generates working papers, sampling, and the confirmation templates. In Pakistan, we are actively using the confirmation sending through the board for particularly for receivables and payables. We are not deploying at the moment for banks and lawyer confirmation, but for receivables and payables, we have extensively using the board for confirmation. These are the list of boards which we are using right now. For example, the revenue and receivable board, payroll audit board, these are all again a simplistic form of the boards. These are not AI enabled boards, but still they have significantly reduced the time which we or our team used to spend on generation of those reports. The last board which I have highlighted, visualization board, it is really interesting board which I really like. It actually gives us a dashboard of the information which is relevant for the board of directors and what information is relevant for the chief financial officers. For example, as a CFO, CFO is interested in knowing the segregation of duties analysis, unusual accounting pair analysis, how many new accounts were opened during the year, the date analysis. Date analysis is really interesting. We noted that in a couple of our clients where the transactions were posted on Sundays. So, and some of the transactions were posted by those people who usually do not post the transaction. So when we have visibility of the 100% transaction, we also have the visibility to analyze the preparers of the transactions and also the date of the transaction and the day of the transaction. So that visibility really helped us to have a very insight discussion with the client, and they were actually very appreciative that we were providing this kind of information for them. Okay, so can you please move to the next slide? So how assurance professional of the future will look like? As we have discussed a lot about the disruptive technologies, Dr. Hussain discussed the use of drone. Dr. Hussain also discussed the use of AI in various business operations. But when we focus on purely on accounting and auditing profession, it is not that we will be in isolation from the other business operations. Say, for example, customer service. Customer service is significantly deploying AI-based chatbots. In Pakistan, HPL has also deployed, and later a lot of telecom companies are deploying. But when it comes to the audit profession, we have to have IT experts with us now to ensure that whatever we are performing audit on the numbers, source whichever from the numbers are coming in, they are actually accurate and proper IT general controls in terms of access management, change management, data backup, everything is available. Can you please move to the next slide? Can you? Okay. So this is how I have actually I summarized how assurance professional would look like. So we will be in suits with finance, risk, and tax and compliance of experience and learning and all academic background. And there would be a lot of technology people with blockchain knowledge, fintech knowledge, robotics knowledge, digital knowledge, artificial intelligence knowledge. So we would have to shake hands with the IT people going forward in order to be competitive in this profession. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay, now I'll discuss the use of RPA and AI in the finance function, which we have seen in Pakistan. There are 6 key, basically, finance functions where we have seen the deployment of RPAs: account receivable processing, payable processing, finance and accounting processing, standard journal entries processing, similarly accounts reconciliation, and FNPA. So I would like to highlight key areas. This is self-explanatory slide, and the RPAs which I have mentioned on the right side of the slide are actually those RPAs which have been one way or the other being deployed or have already been deployed by various companies. So the key, one of the important use case I would like to highlight here is the journal entry posting. So journal entry posting has been automized by many organizations where they do not have integration between their modules. So for example, there is an accounting general ledger module, and then there is another loan module, let's say, or there is any receivable module, and they are not integrated. So that the posting of transaction from the revenue module to the general ledger module is actually automized. And this is really, it is not an expensive kind of tool, which is, this is not an expensive tool, frankly. And if you search and if you discuss with the various technology companies, you will come to know that the investment in robotics is not that expensive. Because obviously as an auditor and accountant, it's very important for us to ensure whatever investments we are making for is it a strategic investment or tactical investment. And I tell you, RPA is a tactical investment. It is not a strategic investment. Okay, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so these are the use cases. I will give you a very interesting example of one of the non-audit client of in Pakistan where we deployed RPA. That's a microfinance bank. They had a core banking system. Basically, it was an old core banking system, and they had a strategic plan to move to the new core banking system in 2 to 3 years, and that was properly approved, and all the vendors were finalized. But before that, they deployed loan module, and they actually automized it through a process whereby all the loan officers used to go to the borrowers, they entered their data in the tablets, and then that tablet, through the tablet app, all the data from the borrower relating to the borrower used to come to their database in their head office. Now, what was happening? Ideally, that module should have been integrated with the core banking system so that the data is transferred and various analyses are performed from the core banking system. So they had a risk rating model in the core banking system. So risk rating model, in order to have risk rating of the individual borrowers, they had to manually punch in the data from the whole database, which they get it from the loan officers who are actually dispersed all over Pakistan. Now, what we did was that we prepared a code for them, which actually read the data, whole data from the database of the loan module, read the particular input parameters which are required by the core banking system, and it automatically opened 6 or 7 screens of core banking system and punch in the data which their finance team or the people, the accountants used to punch in. So the data which was punched by the accountant for at least, let's say, 10 days or 5 days, that timelines was significantly reduced to 1 hour. So there were errors, of course, and those errors and exceptions were then monitored by those accountants who were used to punch in the data. So this is really an interesting example, I tell you, because One way is that they had a strategic investment plan in place. Through that strategic plan, obviously going forward, they will integrate that module with their core banking system. But there are 2-3 years gap. So as a tactical decision, they deployed that board and they reduced the work and actually had more accuracy in data punching. So there are other examples as well in the use case in Pakistan. Can you please move to the next slide? This is another example of AI which is being used, not in Pakistan. This is an example of Middle East, which I have discussed with my colleague and I obtained it for the discussion purposes. Basically, the AI was used to actually analyze the customers who are likely to default in future, who are likely to pay late, and who are actually a very good and regular customers and whom to be blocked. So basically, they obtain the data from any source. Let's say I have given an example of SAP, but it can be Oracle or any other data, any other database source. So based on that, they obtain the customer history, region, default rate, late payment experiences, and also the macroeconomic factors. And then using the machine learning classification algorithm, the clusters were prepared. The customers are with low risk and customers are likely to pay late, and those customers who are actually to expected to default. Now, there were recommendations from that AI tool about certain customers who are likely to pay late. Now, if that recommendation is there, as a human being or as a financial controller, the company used to then analyze whether we need to take any action. For example, we can take no action, or we can actually block the sales, further sales to that customer till the previous receivables are settled. We can reduce the credit limit and also review the risk of particular customers. So here, this process is intelligent automation, and there is involvement of artificial intelligence in this entire classification process. Can you please move to the next slide? Okay, now this is the third part of my presentation, which is actually dealing with the challenges which we have faced, and now I believe that those professionals who would be deploying data analytics and automation and AI in their respective fields, they will face. The first one is, of course, the investment requirement for obviously in the big four firm, globally, they have dwelt and obviously they charge to us, but for small and medium sized practices in Pakistan, there would be significant investment requirements. And then from the client's perspective, this is really important. If they should have the data standardization, their accounting record should be comprehensive for the auditors to actually then analyze and perform audit on the basis of data. Skill set change, of course, will require, as I mentioned, that IT professionals, not just IT professional, but for us being a chartered accountants, we also need to get more understanding. And typically, I tell you, when we were moving from the typical traditional audit, from the data analytics based audit, it was really difficult for us to understand. For example, if a data analytics report give me a complete picture, what was the total sales, what was the total receivables, and how it was converted into cash, effectively, I have seen the whole revenue cycle. But we were not comfortable with that. We still perform some testing because it takes time to change the mindset which we have already developed. So therefore, I believe that retraining and reskilling the auditors will also be an important challenge for us. Obviously, the regulators and other oversight authorities such as AOP or SCCP, how they will view it, that's another important fight. So these are the challenges from the auditor's perspective. When we talk about the challenges from the finance perspective or accounts department perspective, I believe that they need to ask the questions when deploying AI, particularly AI, because that will definitely change their dynamics, and they have to ensure that their ITGC governance framework is properly updated, and they have to ensure that all the compliance risks, technology risks, data risks are properly covered when deploying any artificial intelligence tools. For robotic process automation, I believe that there can be simplistic improvement in their existing policies and procedures, and that would not be so cumbersome or challenging. Can you please move to the next slide? This is actually a slide which just to highlight that currently perception about AI is that there was a survey which was conducted by Gartner in 2018. It was a CIO survey. That survey actually confirmed that 85% of people believe that AI projects by 2022, previously it was 2020, but then they updated it to 2022, will deliver erroneous outcomes due to bias in data, algorithm, and development. So I think there is still a lot of things to be done in this field, and obviously internationally, a lot of development has already been made. And Pakistan, we usually follow the developments which are made internationally. But I think if we are going to deploy any AI tool, it is important that we understand the overall ecosystem of our organization and whether we should have very detailed discussion whether to deploy AI for a particular process or not, because it can be huge investment and that investment can go in vain. Okay, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so this is just a brief overview of the risks on the deployment of artificial intelligence. I will not spend much time on it because this slide is self-explanatory. Particularly, it all revolves around 6 or 7 areas which all the accountants should consider, and they can also collaborate with their IT departments to ensure that these risks are covered. We have mentioned that what are the high risk and what are the medium risk. Particularly, these revolve around data governance, technology risk, and the business processes. Okay, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so this is the last part of my presentation where I would talk about the regulatory perspective. IASB has established a data analytics work group. It was established back in 2017 or perhaps 2016. They have complete information on their website. They have not yet come up with the final recommendation or exposure draft, but they have conducted a lot of meetings, and based on those meetings, they believe that all of the auditing standards, one way or the other, will be impacted because of the if data analytics and AI is deployed as a part of the audit procedures. In the big four firms, we have already standard set protocols. Obviously, those protocols are to be followed in order to make sure that the data-driven audit is compliant with those protocols and procedures and policies of the firms. AICPA has issued guidelines on the data analytics. FRC, UK FRC did a very interesting thematic review. It is available on the internet. Anyone can review it in detail. They performed a thematic review on 7 firms, UK-based 7 firms, and they actually noted that around for general entry testing, almost every firm was deploying data analytics. And for revenue and process analysis, there were limited use, and in certain cases, there were regular use for general ledger and third-party tools. So for impairment modeling and derivation valuation, obviously, derivatives valuation, obviously, that they were limited use, and FRC also had certain reservations on the tools which were deployed. Now, talking about ICAP's role in it, as far as I know, so far there is no guideline available for the members on the data, on the use of data analytics in audit, or you can say the digital audits. I think ICAP can come up with a guideline on this. And in the end, I would say that IASB has clearly mentioned that even if we perform data audit on 100% population, it will not change the definition of the reasonable assurance. It will remain a reasonable assurance even if we have visibility of the 100% population or the entire population of the audit. Okay, so that's all from my side. Can you please move to the next slide? Thank you very much from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ehsan. Thank you very much. The way you explained it, I think is, I'm sure the audience has really enjoyed it. You not only emphasize the data analytics, but also, you give them this comfort. AI is going to be more assisted to the already professions. The professional learning is always there, and the modeling needs to be done. So we have quite a few interesting questions. I think not quite a few, quite a long list. I have it here. I think since we have a little bit overrun the time, but I'll try to keep that. We should make a time shortened now because of the availability. But so I asked some the question which the audience is asking, and if I could not ask or all the question people have posted on, please bear with me. The questions are with us, and I'm sure I'll request the panelists. Maybe we can put this question somewhere in the website or somewhere other on ICAP Facebook page, so they can go back to them as well. So let me ask very first question to Dr. Isa. I think your presentation was excellent. In a geopolitical and geographical position, in perspective, and what's the financial risk and sustainability of the corporate social responsibility score, and how this AI can help those achieve those the index in the marks?
So one of the things that I can see regarding like you said, the global and so the globalization was greatly enhanced and empowered by the existing technologies. Right now, you can what technology is being developed in one country can be used in another one. Hassan just showed, like, for example, that there are certain things that have that he was like you presented things from the Middle East, right? So now it's not just local things; it's across the board. Now, CSR is a different story. CSR has to do a lot also with the with politics in each country, and that usually makes it a little bit more challenging to take from one country to the other, because in this case you're not just dealing with an accounting standard. You're talking about like which some countries they require disclosures in CSR, others they do not do that. It's not. This is kind of, it's more done at this point from a social perspective, from a signaling perspective, as opposed to like just a more standardized. It's not like financial statements. My opinion is that AI can help in extracting information from CSR or about CSR. This is if I understand your question correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much. I think Hassan, I'm going to ask you a very interesting question. I think this is a very good, interesting question to ask. Why AI is both a risk and way to manage risk?
It's really interesting and difficult question as well. Basically, if you ask me, in pure again accounting and from the auditing perspective, I would say the risk, as I gave one example for an organization, if there is a risk to risk of default from a customer, and that risk of default can be early predicted by using the AI tools or any predictive analytics or any other mode, then obviously it is actually avoiding it is actually helping the organization to avoid risk, right? And the other risk in the deployment of AI, I have already mentioned that if that is not properly synced with the users who are actually going to use it, it will not help, or it will not give their ultimate intended benefits.
Right. So some of the question, most of the people I think are interested to know, how do they prepare themselves? Do they need to learn technology? Do they need to learn how to model it? When you talk about humanization of data, Dr. Isa also talked about how we can teach the computer to learn different things. And people are, I think, if you can help us here, to how would they prepare? I mean, I'm sure one of the things you just said, suits and gene combination, but I think if you can elaborate, and I'll ask the same question for both of you from the little different perspective.
Okay,
so
Dr.
Isa
let me
can go
answer
ahead
this
first.
question first.
Oh, you can go ahead first. Hassan, yeah, okay. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, please, Hassan.
Okay. So basically, there is a from the accountant's perspective, I think when it comes to the data analytics, I don't think so there is any specific technology information is required, because it can be through any Excel report or any SQL based software which can be simply used and analyzed. A basic understanding of how data moves is enough. But when it comes to the AI, deployment of AI in the audit and finance function, I think there would be certain need to actually handshake with the IT people, because we cannot have that level of expertise. Because I know a couple of people who are working in developing a tool for a bank for anti-money laundering and fraud detection. That is an AI-based tool. But I tell you, there are a lot of chartered accountants working on it, but they don't know how that coding is being done. So they just give an idea, they give the process information, and that is converted into tool by the IT experts. And then they come up with a demo, which is again reviewed by us, the accountants. So in my view, for analytics, there is no significant requirement of technology information.
So Dr. Isa, same question to you. How would they prepare the professions who are practicing and people who are right now in learning their skills as well?
I agree with what Hassan mentioned. Basically, there are certain technologies that would require the auditor to learn more. If an auditor wants to become an expert in AI, they need to learn that. They need to learn probably how to program, how to do these things. There are other things that do not require a lot of learning. The learning curve is not that steep, and it's not that difficult. For example, RPA, in the project that we had, the auditors actually learned how to maintain and to even modify slightly the bot. So it's not, there are certain technologies that are more complicated than others. What is important is that they need to speak the same language, because going forward, we have more and more people, like IT people, involved in audits and in our world. As a result, you cannot have an auditor who does not understand their language. This is what Hassan was mentioning about suits and jeans. It's basically, they need to speak the same language, but they don't need to have exactly the same skills. Now, I admit there are, like, accounting schools in general, they're lack in teaching their students. But you can see it from now, you can see more and more schools started to introduce data analytics courses and to try and integrate data analytics courses in their accounting curriculum to try and teach their students some data analytics. So they're not going to be an expert in a specific software or specific technology, but they would understand the concepts and they would be able to successfully interact with more skilled IT people.
Excellent, excellent. I think I'm going to short this the question answer session a little bit. I think there's a lot of other questions as well, and I see Dr. Isa has also responded to individuals their answer as well. So I'm taking this further. I think this is one of the most learning session for me, at least. You know, I learned, I added a lot to my knowledge as well, and I'm sure the same is with our audience, who's overwhelmingly participated in today's session. Now I welcome the president of ICAP, Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh. Thank you very much, sir, joining us. I'll be eager to hear your point of view, and I think it's been an amazingly fabulous, excellent session, a lot of learning. Rana Sahab said earlier, you know, we made it this shorter session rather than, you know, long day session. I do realize it could be a one day long. But again, I think being it shorter, it probably had more interesting things done. I think we need to continue it to a bit more focus. I think there's a lot of topics which Dr. Isa touched based upon and Hassan touched upon, and people have started taking interest on it, and we can have some, you know, what you call outlay out of this session to a little more focused session, and that can lay a foundation of artificial intelligence in more detail the profession. So, sir, I welcome you, and we look forward to hear from your point of view. Please welcome Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh, President ICAP.
So thank you so much, Nadeem Saab. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and Assalamu Alaikum to all the participants. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the digital world. Thank you so much. An interesting session. Let me first pay my gratitude to all our speakers, and Nadeem Malik Saab to you, Hassan Saab to you, Dr. Isa, thank you for enriching our participants with your knowledge, with your experience, with your expertise. And I have learned a lot from your session as well, a lot of interesting insights. So thank you for that. Now, coming to this interesting topic, I believe these are interesting times for finance and assurance professionals, certainly very interesting times. I recall I'm a member of the International Federation of Accountants, Professional Accountants and Business Committee. That's a global forum where we discussed and debated for 2 years how the finance function is going to look like in the next 10 to 20 years. So we had discussions with business finance leaders from across the globe, more from a finance perspective and less from an assurance perspective, but more from how the technology, the cognitive computing, AI, blockchain, RPA are going to reshape the world of accounting and finance. And to keep it brief and short, I mean, we came to a conclusion that the way this technology is going to impact us is, of course, far greater than that we think. But at the same time, the way it is going to empower us, the way it is going to augment us, supplement us, and support us, it has never been before. So for finance leaders, for accounting and finance professionals, I mean, the way all these technologies are going to bring efficiencies, help them with greater insights, more data analytics, greater predictability with greater confidence. I mean, the way these technologies are going to empower, it has never been before. So they will be better, probably more effective and more efficient finance and business leaders helping their businesses navigate through the future in far better and greater way than they have been doing it before. So that was a short, sweet summary of that. Of course, there are certain skill sets that are going to be redundant. Certain mundane routine processes, people, of course, that skill set is going to be redundant sooner than later. But there are certainly a lot more exciting roles and interesting skill sets that are emerging as well. So for young professionals and for students, these are exciting times. One of our colleague there, he was the VP in Shell Trading Company. He shared his analysis of the Shell global world, that they put different people, I mean, technology guys, engineers, and accountants into data analytics. And accountants turned out to be far more effective data analysts with some IT knowledge than other professionals, because their ability to put numbers across processes is amazing. And that's what is exciting. I mean, the way, that's where I'm saying that the way they will feel empowered, I mean, the technology is going to empower them the way, the data is going to empower them the way they have never been empowered before. Let me share with you my example. As 3-4 years back, when I was head of supply chain in K Electric, right on my dashboard as head of supply chain, we had a fleet of 2,000 plus vehicles. With ClickView dashboard, I could drill down to the vehicle level, and through the GIS mapping and integration of that GIS data with my data, I could exactly locate and find out which vehicle and which area has a problem, right, on a real-time basis. So this was the kind of empowerment that I had about 3 years ago. So imagine the empowerment that technology is going to bring going forward. So I think these are interesting times. The onus, as I said, what Institute is doing, I mean, the fact that the Institute has established this Digital Assurance and Accounting Board is a testimony that we are realizing, and we understand the importance of it. We are also bringing in new education scheme 2021, where these skill sets will be, of course, an area of focus for us in the new scheme. And at the same time, we are working on certain certifications as well, and trying to collaborate with certain institutions for the continuous professional development of our members as well. Because the pace of change we know will be going to be faster than ever. And we need to continue as professionals. It's also our responsibility, and of course, Institute's responsibility, to enable us to continue to upskill ourselves in this area. They are interesting times, I would say again, and fantastic presentation and a great discussion. Thank you so much. I agree with Nadeem Saab. We need to have more such sessions. And Rana Saab, compliments to you for organizing this, and I'm sure you are going to organize more such programs in future. Thank you. Nadeem Saab, you are.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Khalilullah Sheikh Saab. I think the best thing what I learned from you, embrace the technology. A lot of people, whenever the new technology coming up, the fear factor sets in. I think the time to embrace it. I think after today's session, and I'm sure the audience is looking forward to it, all energized. Again, Rana Sahab is a key player to energizing it. Thank you very much, Rana Sahab. Thank you, Khalilullah Sahab, for your participation, your encouragement, and thank you very much, our our learner friends here and our panelists. I think we'll look forward to see you more, Dr. Hussain Isa from the East Coast. In early morning, he joined us 8 o'clock from there. Thank you very much for your time and your sharing of your knowledge. Asan, excellent. I think you are giving a local perspective, a lot of learning, something I think we have opened up the new thing. So I don't want to forget the thank you to real heroes to arrange this thing, Saida Nurul, and she's here, very persuasive, very particular, very meticulous. I think thank you very much, and she's done a great job arranging, coordinating, collaborating. We're all sitting here for that session. She's done a great job. Your IT team has been excellent. We had good, excellent testing session yesterday, and I think make sure everything goes right and everything went well. Thank you very much for all the participants who have been here. They participated, they put their answers and questions as well. And I think it's a good, engaging session. We look forward to have more. Thank you all. God bless. Pakistan Zindabad. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all for sparing time and making these efforts. As a host, I'm really obliged to have you all of you here, and look forward to have you a number of times again, inshallah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.